Saskia from rawfreedom.co.uk, and today I'm going to be demonstrating the raw Thai green curry, which is really delicious, and it's really particularly good for when the weather's getting colder. I love to eat it with cooked brown rice or rice noodles. I like kind of mixing it in with some cooked food as well, because it just gives it that extra bit of warmth and it's really satisfying as well. So first of all, we're going to chop up our veggies. So we're going to, we've got one courgette which we're going to grate, and I find it easier just to cut the courgette in half, because I might find it easier to just grate it like that. And any kind of large bits that are left over from grating you can just put into your compost. So then put your grated courgette into your mixing bowl. And to that you are going to add 6 mushrooms cut into bite-sized pieces. Now I generally don't wash my mushrooms, I'll kind of brush them just to get any dirt off. You'll find quite often when you wash mushrooms that they actually absorb the water, which can affect their texture. I prefer to use brown mushrooms or chestnut mushrooms because they've got a more mushroomy and deep flavour. This is enough to serve 2 hungry people. Or if you're serving it with rice, then you can probably serve, I would say, 3 to 4 people with this quantity. And then we're going to put in a handful of sugar snap peas. You can also use mange tout for this, and I'm literally just going to cut them in half. Add them to our veggies. And a handful of young spinach. I mean, this is quite a big handful. You want to use the tender spinach just because it's much kind of easier to eat raw. And I'm just going to shred this. And then we're going to put in half a yellow pepper. Make sure that you get all the seeds out, because the seeds can be quite bitter. And again, I'm going to cut this into bite-sized chunks. And then to this mixture, I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of tamari and 3 tablespoons of olive oil. I'm going to put the oil in first because it kind of helps to spread the tamari around a bit more once you add that. If you add the tamari first, quite often what can happen is you'll get, like, the mushrooms will absorb bits of tamari without the oil, and it'll be really quite sort of strong. So just get your hands in there and mix the oil around. Oh, it's looking delicious already. And then to that I'm going to add the tamari. So that's 2 tablespoons of tamari. You can use nama shoyu if you've got nama shoyu. Tamari is wheat-free soy sauce, for those that don't know. It's not actually a raw product, but it gives a lot of body to raw dishes. And what we're doing here is marinating all the vegetables so they can soften whilst we actually make our Thai curry sauce. And then finally we're going to add in the juice of half a lime. can kind of get your fingers in there, give it a good squeeze. Get all that lovely juice out. Final mix. Spread the tamari and the lime through, and you're really getting the smell of that lime. It's absolutely delicious. And the vegetables are already softening. And the reason why we marinate when it comes to raw food is not just for flavour, but because it softens the texture of the vegetables and gives them a more cooked-like quality. Okay, so now we're going to move on to our sauce. And I'm going to do it in my Blendtec blender, but you can just as easily use a hand blender and do it in a jug. It's really easy to make. So we're doing 1 spring onion, and I tend to just use the pale parts because I find the darker part really quite strong and it repeats on me. And then we're going to use 1 lemongrass. You can get lemongrass from the supermarket these days, which is fantastic, or you can get them from Oriental supermarkets as well. Now the important thing with lemongrass is to make sure that you strip it back far enough so that you get to the point where it's all soft and silky. Because when it's soft and silky and bendy, it's no longer hairy, and quite often if you put the outer leaves in, it'll be like you've got sort of cat hairs in your food, which is really not terribly pleasant. So yeah, so you want to kind of strip it back until you've got the nice soft bit. And you can do that all the way up. I chop it in half because it just sometimes makes it easier to get those outer layers out. Give it a little chop, particularly if you're using a hand blender. Make sure you chop it up quite small because that will really help your blender to blend it. And then we've got ginger, which I'm going to add 1 inch of. I generally leave the skin on, I just kind of cut any knobbly bits off. And again, if you've got a hand blender, you can just chop it lightly and put it in to your jug. And then here, we've got 3 kaffir lime leaves, which I've soaked to soften. Kaffir lime leaves you can either get from Oriental supermarkets, or these days you can get them from most good supermarkets as well. I mean, I can get them in Tesco's. And I'm just cutting out the woody stems. And then into the blender they go. And then we're going to be adding a handful of coriander, fresh coriander. And then we're adding half a green chilli. You can leave the seeds in or take them out depending on how spicy you like things. And 1 tablespoon of tamari for our sauce. And finally, we're going to add in some coconut milk. Now you can make your own homemade coconut milk by blending raw coconut with water and squeezing it through a nut milk bag, but I'm fine with using organic coconut milk. And we're going to add in 200 millilitres, which is half of this tin. There we go. And blend until it's all smooth and creamy. Now if you've got a hand blender, you can absolutely make this recipe. The important thing with a hand blender is that sometimes you just have to chop things much more finely than in one of these high-speed blenders. Oh, that's smelling delicious. So then add that to your veggies and give it a good stir round. And your Thai green curry is then ready to eat, and I'm going to have a mouthful of it. Oh, that is so